Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is just a bit of a continuation on of a couple of photographs that I put up yesterday. I thought it might be worthwhile doing a little video just to sort of talk about this situation, because I've seen plenty of damage caused by sealant over the years, not just in motorbikes but in cars. And this one here is not super bad, but it just shows you how innocuous, sticking a gasket onto a sump might be and what might come of it. So this is the sump I showed you yesterday, and this is the stuff that was in it. Now you can see it's silicon. It's like black silicon. There's another blob of it there. That's jelly-like in its body, and it was in the bottom of the sump. Now these little black things here, which I'm trying to photograph without getting a shadow in there, they are, I think, in fact I'm almost positive, pieces of permatite or some similar gasket material which is broken off the inside of this gasket here and fallen into the sump. The outside of the gasket, where it's still on, has the same texture and feel and crumbling ability of the stuff that I found in the sump, but more importantly, and I might just stop this and I'll take it out and put it in the sun so you can see it a bit better. Now this is very hard to see in this material because it keeps springing shut, and when I try to stretch it out the bits fall out of it. But if I get round this side, maybe there is a speck of it which may or may not work. Right on where it goes over the back of the bike there, you can see there's a speck of it on there. Well, this was full of it. This filter, it had maybe 60 or 70 little particles of that trapped in the filter. So that's the reason I decided to make the video. Generally speaking, when I have a bike in for a major surface, I always take the sump off, and as I said to you recently, I took the sump off a bike of my own, my GSPD, when I was finally rebuilding the engine, and I found the bloomin' roll pin out of the front main bearing carrier lying in the sump. This one doesn't have that, but it does have these particulate matter, which is obviously a Permatex gasket. I can't get that sump off the sump gasket off the sump easily at the moment, so it's really well and truly glued on there. And what's happened is when it's been screwed on, it's kind of oozed up around the side, and there is a piece of the gasket has come out with this Permatex glue or some form of gasket glue, which has gone hard. The stuff that oozed up the inside has gone even harder, and I'm guessing that with the vibration of the bike it's gradually broken off. Fortunately, there was a bit of it in the strainer. The bigger pieces were stuck in the strainer, and the rest of it appears to have been caught quite satisfactorily in the oil filter. When I get a new bike, I always take the sump off them for a major service, and I always, generally with any bike that comes in here for a service, I cut the oil filter open and have a look inside it just to see what's there so I can report to the owner. So most important thing I'm trying to tell you with this video is your bike doesn't require Permatex or gasket glue or anything else on 99.99% of its mating surfaces. The gaskets these days are made out of a substance that has a coating on it which will remain oil tight and which won't get into the oil by accident and contaminate things. Now the worrying thing is this jelly-like substance here. This has obviously been around something circular, possibly a pushrod rubber, I would think. And that bit there is just a blob. It's just a piece that's obviously been squeezed out internally when something's been put together, and it's cut it off and it's floated around and got into the sump. And again, fortunately, both of those pieces are too big to go through the holes in the strainer, which is a great thing, because if that were to get up into the system somewhere, it would quite easily block a main oil gallery, either through the big end bearings or up into the top end easily, no trouble at all. So what I'm saying to you is, when you're working on your own bike, if you're working on your own bike, and if you are going to use any kind of sealant, which I generally recommend you don't. It should be in the very, very most minimal amounts, the most sparing amount that you can put on, so that even if you squash it up, and you will squash it up if you look at the number of holes in that sump, there are, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 11, 13, 14 bolts hold that sump on, and the pressure that you could exert with those 14 10mm bolts over such a small area is quite enormous. Obviously you need to hold the oil in, but what's happened, I would say, is that that's squished the Permatex gasket material out, and it's then gone hard in the heat of the oil, because it's not really meant to be exposed to oil, it's meant to be on a gasket at a mating surface, and it's then broken into little pieces, and that's where the danger is. They're good enough, they're not metallic, but they are good enough to, if they got through the system, to certainly really destroy white metal bearings with no trouble at all. So just something to think about. It's your bike always, but if you want some advice, I would take some very serious thinking about using any kind of sealant or gasket material on any of these kinds of surfaces. Ride safely, stay well, we'll talk again.